I have filed 11 incident reports in my career. 3 were for equipment failures. 2 were for crew misconduct. 1 was for a navigational error that nearly cost us the Vethera corridor and 4 years of diplomatic groundwork. The remaining 5, the ones my commanding officer read twice, the ones that got forwarded to the Strategic Memory Division without explanation, the ones I still find in my own personnel file under the classification header behavioral anomaly, unresolved. All 5 of those reports were about the same thing. A single human. Not a fleet. Not a weapons platform. Not some catastrophic new technology we hadn't anticipated. 1 human. 1 salvage operative. 1 person who, by every metric my species has developed across 600 years of interstellar contact, should not have been able to do what she did, and who, more disturbingly, did not appear to understand that she had done anything worth noting. I have been asked, more times than I can count, to explain what happened during the Kethavari incident. I have given the official version. I have given the condensed version for the council. I have given the version where I leave out the part about the song, because the song is the part that no one believes and, also, frankly, the part one think about most. But, no one has ever asked me to give the true version. The version where I admit that I went in skeptical, came out shaken, and have spent every cycle since quietly revising every assumption my civilization handed me about what an intelligent species is supposed to be. So, here it is. The true version. It starts, as most things involving humans seem to, in the middle of something already going wrong. My name is Savithorin Kale, and I log everything. It is a compulsion. My crewmates call it obsessive. My commanding officer calls it professionally invaluable when convenient and insufferable otherwise. My therapist, I have a therapist, this is relevant, calls it a coping mechanism for environments I cannot control. I call it the only reason I have any record of what happened at all, because the Kethavari station's own logs were destroyed in the first 7 minutes, and everything that followed was, officially, unwitnessed. I witnessed it. I have 63 hours of personal log entries to prove it. Entry 1 begins, salvage contact established, 0.4 rotations past standard resupply window. Station Kethavari is not responding on any channel. Assigned to boarding assessment team alongside 3 crew from the Vethera Corridor Authority and 1 human contractor. The human's name is Ferreira. She is eating something that smells like engine coolant and appears to find this enjoyable. That last observation is not relevant to the mission assessment. I logged it anyway. I log everything. We docked at Kethavari station through the secondary airlock because the primary one had been sheared off, not damaged, not malfunctioning, sheared, the way you shear a branch, clean and deliberate, and the docking sleeve was a tangle of pressurized conduit and exposed support lattice that the Vethera Authority's senior officer, a Peltani named Asek, immediately declared impassable. Ferreira looked at it for approximately 4 seconds. Then, she unclipped her tether line, threaded it through 2 sections of exposed lattice, and went through. I logged this. Human contractor bypasses declared impassable docking obstruction using personal tether and apparent immunity to concern. Duration, 40 seconds. Asek's threat assessment protocols have visibly failed to update. I should explain what I look like, for context, because the way I process the world matters to this story. Sethvari, my species, are tall. Not impressively tall, just inconveniently tall, the kind of tall that means every ship built by any other species in the corridor requires me to compress my secondary joints when passing through doorways. We have 4 eyes arranged in a band around the upper skull, which gives us excellent peripheral vision and makes it nearly impossible for anyone to sneak up on us, which I mention because this is not a skill that helped me in any way during the Kethavari incident, and I resent it. We also have a secondary nervous system that reads structural vibration the way other species read light. I don't just feel a damaged hull, I read it. A compromised bulkhead gives off a specific frequency. A pressure differential sings at a different pitch. Intact station architecture hums in a pattern I have heard my whole life, consistent and rhythmic, the way a healthy body maintains its own temperature. Kethavari station did not hum. Kethavari station was making a sound I had no word for. Lower than a groan. Deeper than a warning tone. The kind of frequency that in Sci-Fi anatomy bypasses hearing entirely and arrives directly in the chest cavity, where it sits and vibrates against the secondary heart. I logged it as Station Structural Integrity Reading, Non-Standard. Recommend immediate withdrawal. I did not recommend this aloud, because Ferreira was already inside and I was not going to be the only one standing in the docking sleeve. We went in. The interior of Kethavari was Pelthani built, which means it was efficient and angular and lit in the deep amber spectrum that Pelthani find comfortable and every other species finds slightly ominous. Emergency lighting had replaced the standard ambient, a cooler, bluer tone that made the walls look like the inside of something frozen. There were scorch marks on the corridor walls. There were tool cases left open in the passageway, contents still inside, as if whoever had been using them had simply stopped mid-task and did not come back. Osek crouched at the nearest one. His dorsal membranes, the wide, pale structures that run along Peltani's shoulders and indicate emotional state, were pressed flat. Fear display. Recent, he said. The thermal reading on these tools is 3 to 5 rotations old. Whatever happened here, 12 days, Ferreira said. She was standing 6 paces further down the corridor, looking at the wall. Not at any obvious feature of the wall. Just at the wall. Give or take. The residue pattern on the scorching puts initial incident around 12 days ago. Osek's membranes did something complicated. How do you determine oxidation rate? Changes based on atmosphere composition. This station runs a standard corridor mix, slightly elevated nitrogen, so the edge definition on the burn pattern degrades at about. She trailed off. Tilted her head. Yeah. 12 days. Could be 11. I logged. Ferreira has identified timeline from residue analysis. She is in her early career. The analysis she just performed is graduate-level xenoforensics. She is not carrying forensics equipment. She appears to have done this using vision alone. Updating personnel assessment. I want to be honest, I had not read Ferreira's file carefully before the mission. I had glanced at it. Salvage and recovery operative, 6 years experience, certified in breach assessment and emergency structural work. The photograph showed a compact human woman with dark hair pulled back, a scar along the left jaw from what I later learned was a cable strike during a pressurized environment failure 4 years ago, and an expression that the Sci-Fi categorization system logs as neutral but, which I now understand means thinking about several things at once and choosing not to share any of them. I had categorized her as support function, moderate competence, unlikely to be relevant to primary mission assessment. I was, as I have said, updating my assessment. We moved deeper. The structural vibration against my secondary nervous system was getting worse, not louder, but more complex, the way a simple distress signal becomes complex when multiple systems are failing at different rates and producing overlapping frequencies. I kept my stride steady. I noted that the third member of our team, a young Peltani technician named Verath who was on his second off-world assignment, had started keeping very close to the wall. Ferreira, ahead of us, kept to the center of the corridor. This is worth noting because Peltani instinct and, I believe, Sci-Fi instinct, and the instinct of most species I have worked with is to hug a wall in an unknown hostile environment. Walls mean coverage. Walls mean one fewer direction from which threat can arrive. It is basic spatial threat management. Ferreira walked down the middle of the corridor like she was on an afternoon transit walkway, hands loose at her sides, head moving in small increments as she checked doors and ceiling fixtures and the cable routing overhead. You walk exposed, I said. It came out more like an observation than a warning, which is how most things I say come out. She glanced back. Better sightlines. I want to see a full door before I'm next to it, not after. The wall provides cover. The wall provides the illusion of cover and removes my ability to assess the threat before it's already lateral. She looked at a junction ahead, checked both directions, kept walking. I'd rather know what's coming. I logged. Ferreira's threat assessment prioritizes information over concealment. This is either very sophisticated tactical thinking or very poor tactical training. Updating assessment again pending further data. The control center was on the 3rd level. We took the maintenance stairs because the lift was non-functional, and because Ferreira had assessed the lift shaft with a handheld resonance scanner for approximately 30 seconds before saying no in a tone that Osek did not argue with. The stairs were narrow, which is normal for maintenance infrastructure, and the third-level door was sealed, which was expected, and the seal was a standard corridor authority emergency lockdown, which Osek had override codes for. He tried 3 codes. None of them worked. The 4th code gave a short, flat tone and, then, the panel went dark. Locked out, Osek said. His membranes had gone from flat to pulled tight, which in Peltani is a different register of fear entirely, not acute alarm but the kind of dawning, spreading cold that arrives when you begin to understand the scope of what you're in. Overridden from inside? Varath asked. No. Osek stared at the panel. Overridden from outside. Someone locked this door from a remote location. Someone who was not us. Silence on the stairs. I was aware of the structural vibration in my chest, steady, wrong, patient. Ferreira was looking at the door hinges. Not the panel. Not the lock mechanism. The hinges. The physical hardware that attached the door to the frame. How old is this station? She asked. Osek looked at her. 41 years. It was the original corridor marker station. Peltani construction throughout? The original structure, yes. There have been modifications. She nodded, slow, like she was completing his sentence for reasons of her own. Standard 40-year maintenance would have replaced the electronic seals twice. They probably upgraded the lockdown protocols during the second replacement. She crouched in front of the hinge, produced a tool from her suit's utility band that I can only describe as a thing humans carry for reasons that never seem obvious until they become obvious, and began doing something to the base pin. But they would have kept the original physical hinge spec. 41-year Peltani hinge spec uses a removable base pin as a safety fallback. Emergency manual access. She paused. Nobody uses it anymore because the electronic overrides are better. Until they're not. The pin came out. She moved to the second hinge. Third. You are removing the door, Osek said. Yeah. From the hinge side. Seems faster than arguing with the panel. I logged, Ferreira bypasses electronic lockdown by removing door from hinge assembly. Total elapsed time, 90 seconds. Osek has not closed his mouth for approximately 40 of those seconds. I do not believe he is aware of this. The control center was a disaster. Not from violence, or not primarily. There were no bodies, no damage that suggested direct conflict. It was a disaster of systems failure, every display dark or flickering, data cores pulled from their housings and, stacked with mechanical precision in the corner, power routing visibly rerouted through bypass channels that were not built for the load they were carrying. It looked like someone had performed emergency surgery on the station's brain and left the theater mid-procedure. What did this? Varath asked. Ferreira was already at the nearest console. Them, she said. She tilted one of the dark displays to catch the emergency light from the doorway. The screen was physically intact. She traced the power routing from the display back along the wall conduit with 2 fingers and, then, stopped, pulled a panel off the wall housing with a familiar "this is not supposed to open this way but I know it does" efficiency, and looked at the wiring inside. They pulled the station's automated defense grid offline. Manually. Then, they locked the command level from a remote relay, which means they're still somewhere on the station and they still have signal access. She straightened. And they pulled the emergency beacon. 3 weeks ago, based on the oxidation on the manual disconnect. She was quiet for a moment. 12 days ago was when things got worse. Who is they? Osek asked. She looked at him. Not at all of us. At him, specifically, with an expression that I filed in my personal log as person deciding how much of a true answer to give. There is a Sethvari word for this at Vetharak, the moment of deliberate calibration before difficult speech, but, when we use it, it is formal and considered and takes several breaths. Ferreira's version of it lasted maybe 2 seconds. The Corridor Authority has a maintenance contract with a third-party logistics operator, she said. I've done resupply runs out here before. About 6 months ago, the contract changed hands. She looked at the stacked data cores. The new operator has a secondary interest in decommissioned corridor infrastructure. Specifically in the data that passes through it. Osek's membranes went absolutely rigid. You're describing data extraction, he said. By a licensed contractor. I'm describing the physical evidence I'm looking at and telling you what it suggests. She picked up one of the data cores. Turned it over. Put it down. I'm not in the filing of reports business. I was, as she knew, absolutely in the filing of reports business. I filed 3 updates to my personal log in the following 90 seconds. The first noted the structural arrangement of the extracted data cores. The second noted Ferreira's apparent prior knowledge of the contract situation and its implications for this mission's scope. The third noted that the station's structural vibration had just changed pitch, and that the frequency now had a second component, sharper, more regular, like a pulse, that I had not logged in any previous environment. I was still trying to classify the new frequency when the station's lights went out completely. Not emergency lighting. Not flickering. Gone. Every spectrum, standard and backup, every corridor glow and panel indicator and the soft residual light from the still-running consoles. Gone. Darkness in a pressurized environment, surrounded by walls that were vibrating wrong, in a station where someone was actively managing the systems against us. I heard Verrath make a sound. High, sharp, cut off. Peltani fear reflex. I heard Osek's hand hit a wall as he reached for it. I heard Ferreira say, calmly, in the total black, nobody move. I need 6 seconds. She got maybe 3 before the light came back. Not station lighting. A small, handheld lamp, cool white, pulled from somewhere in her utility band and activated with a motion I hadn't seen because it had been dark. She held it up, swept it once around the room. Then, she put it in her teeth, which is a human behavior I had read about and still found genuinely difficult to process on a biological level. She put the lamp in her mouth, as if her jaw were a mounting bracket, and went back to the console she had been examining. Someone's running the lighting from a secondary relay, she said, around the lamp. Station systems are still active. They just want us blind. She pulled another cable housing panel off the wall. Okay. This is manual. We're going to get the emergency lights back in about somewhere below us, in the maintenance levels. Something heavy impacted a floor with enough force that I registered it through my feet before I heard it. Then, a second impact. Then, further away, a third. Not random structural settling. Not pressure differential movement. Footsteps. I logged unidentified personnel confirmed present in station structure. Descending from upper maintenance levels. Number unknown. Threat classification, pending. Personal assessment, bad. Osek had pulled his sidearm. Verrath was against the wall with both hands flat on it, which is a Peltani grounding behavior under extreme stress, the equivalent of needing to physically confirm that the floor exists. Ferreira, lamp and teeth, had both hands inside the wall panel. Ferreira, I said. She made a noise that meant I'm busy. There are people in this station. Yep. They are moving toward us. They almost certainly disabled the lighting deliberately and are aware of our presence. She pulled something loose inside the panel, and the emergency lighting came back, that cool, blue-tinted amber, running along the floor strips and doorframe seals, and she took the lamp out of her mouth and looked at me with an expression I logged as thank you for that summary, Sabbath, it was very helpful. I know, she said. What do we do? She put the lamp away. Zipped the pocket. Looked at the door we'd come through, the one without hinges now, propped back in its frame by its own weight, and then, at the stacked data cores in the corner. Do any of you know how to play dead? She asked. I logged, Ferreira has a plan. I do not yet know what it is. My secondary heart is beating at 1.4 times standard rate, which my medical file notes as my threshold for acute stress response. I have not yet reached 1.4. I am at 1.37. I am logging this in case it becomes relevant. Asek stared at her. Play dead. It's a human thing. We pretend to be not alive. Convincingly. Does anyone here have a species-specific death display? Varath raised his hand like a student. Pelthani Thanatosis is, we go rigid and, our membranes seal. But, it only works at low light, we have low light. She looked at the door. Okay. Varath, Thanatosis position against the far wall. Asek, I need you to be a bad shot. I am an excellent shot, Asek said, with the particular dignity of someone who considers this point non-negotiable. I know. I need you to be a bad one for approximately the next 10 minutes. She looked at me. You. Seth Vori. I need you to make a sound. What kind of sound? She told me. I logged, I did not know I could make that sound. I have now confirmed that I can. I am choosing not to examine why she knew this before I did. The footsteps were on the stairs. 3 sets, I thought, maybe 4, moving with the careful fast rhythm of people who knew where they were going and were not worried about who heard them coming. I recorded everything that followed. Every second of it. I have listened back to the recordings approximately 40 times and there are still moments I cannot explain with any framework my civilization provided me. The part where Ferreira positioned herself takes 11 seconds of the recording. The part where she spoke to the approaching personnel, not to us, to them, in a conversational tone, from behind a collapsed console, while technically invisible, takes 4 seconds. The part where she said, in standard, with her voice completely level, I've already transmitted the data core serial numbers to the Corridor Authority relay at Vethra Junction, so if you're planning to run, you should know the manifest is already logged, takes 8 seconds and was, as I later confirmed, a complete fabrication. She had not transmitted anything. The relay at Vethra Junction is 4 days of light travel from Kethavari Station. She said it as if it were simply a fact, the kind of fact you mention to someone as a courtesy, the way you might note that the weather is poor today. No threat in it. No bravado. Just information, offered generously, to people who had come to do us harm in the dark. I logged, Ferreira has deterred 4 armed personnel with 1 false statement, delivered without inflection, while concealed behind damaged equipment in near darkness. I am not certain what category of skill this represents. The closest Sethvari term is Veltharuk, which translates approximately as the kind of stillness that makes a predator wonder if you're the prey or the trap. We do not use this term as a compliment. I think, in this context, it may need to be. They left. Not immediately. There was a pause long enough that Varithus Thanatosis would have been over if he hadn't held it together, and then the footsteps withdrew. Down the stairs. Back into the maintenance levels. Then, nothing. Asek lowered his weapon. Varath unpeeled from the wall. I sat down on the floor, which is not a Sethvari behavior under normal circumstances, but which my body apparently required. Ferreira emerged from behind the collapsed console, brushed debris off her suit, and began collecting the stacked data cores into her carry bag with the methodical calm of someone completing a filing task. We should move, she said. They'll verify the claim eventually. Probably have the relay response time memorized. She zipped the bag. Slung it. We've got maybe 20 minutes before they figure out I was lying. You were lying, Asek said. Very much yes. You told them the data had already been transmitted. Also yes. But the relay is 4 days out. Correct. She picked up the bag, checked the weight, adjusted the strap. But they didn't know whether I'd had time to route through the emergency microburst beacon before the main comms went down. That's a 30-second window. They didn't know if I'd used it. She looked at him. Did you know about the emergency microburst beacon on this class of station? Asek's membranes moved. Yes. Standard specification, they didn't. Or they weren't sure. She headed for the door. 20 minutes. I logged, walking, Ferreira wins engagement through asymmetric information. She did not have the information. She had the knowledge that they did not know she lacked it. This is a different category of capability than I was prepared for. I am not certain how to classify it. And then, because I log everything, also, my secondary heart is back at standard rate. I am not sure when that happened. I think it was around the time she started moving. We got out through a maintenance conduit in the station's outer ring, Ferreira's suggestion, executed in the dark with a lamp in her teeth again, with 3 corridor authority personnel who were all having varying degrees of existential difficulty. The conduit was designed for service drones, which meant it was approximately 60% of my ideal shoulder width, and I spent 40 minutes folding myself through it by alternating my secondary joint compression in a sequence I would not recommend to anyone with either a spine or a filing quota. Ferreira fit through it easily. She went first. She also went last, sent Asek and Varath ahead, waited while I navigated the narrowest section, and, then, came through at a pace that suggested this was a manageable inconvenience rather than the near structural failure of my professional dignity. When I finally folded out into the outer ring maintenance bay, I sat down again. Ferreira sat beside me. Not across from me. Beside me. Which is not a standard professional proximity but, which my secondary nervous system registered as, I logged it as, non-threatening proximity chosen deliberately, probably in acknowledgement of stress response. She had something in her hand. The thing that smelled like engine coolant, from before. She was eating it. What is that? I asked. Nutrition bar. She held it out toward me in a way that I understood, from prior xenocultural briefings, to be an offering. It smells like secondary coolant compound. Yeah. She did not withdraw it. It's a very old Earth recipe. Nobody's entirely sure what's in them. She took another bite. I've eaten them my whole career. They're bad for you and they're great. I did not take the offered portion. But, I noted, in my log, that it was offered. There is a word in Sethfari, Orith, that means the specific act of sharing something unpleasant that you have adapted to, with someone who is not. It is a word we use for mentors passing down difficult knowledge to new crew. For elders sharing the weight of long service with those who haven't carried it yet. I had never applied it to a nutrition bar. I logged 0.4 rotations into mission. Station Kathavari is compromised. Data cores recovered. Threat neutralized through non-violent deception. 0 injuries to recovery team. Contractor Ferreira performance assessment upgraded from support function, moderate competence to I do not have a classification that currently fits. Updating. Then, because I log everything and, because something about the tight dark of that conduit had rearranged something in my secondary nervous system that I was not ready to name, she offered me the nutrition bar. I didn't take it. I'm not sure why I logged this. I think it seemed important. It did seem important. I am still not sure why. The official mission duration was 4 days. This is incorrect. The official mission duration is what ASIC filed with Vethera Corridor Authority because anything beyond 4 days requires senior command review, and ASIC, for reasons I understand in retrospect better than I did at the time, did not want senior command review. We were on Kathavari Station for 9 days. I logged all of them. Day 2 began with the discovery that the maintenance conduit we'd used to access the outer ring had been sealed at the far end sometime overnight, not damaged, not compromised, sealed, with a repair compound that had been applied neatly and allowed to cure. Someone had watched us go through it. Had waited until we were safely on the other side, and then filled in our exit. Asek looked at the sealed conduit for a long time without speaking. Varath sat down against the wall and looked at his hands. I logged, conduit egress blocked. We are, in operational terms, contained within the station's outer ring maintenance bay. This development suggests active, patient, and methodical opposition. Standard Sethfari threat assessment rates are survival probability at I have run this calculation 4 times and I do not like the number. I am going to stop running it. Ferreira crouched in front of the repair seal. She touched the edge, where the compound met the conduit housing. She took a small scraping of it on her thumbnail and brought it close to her face, not using any instrument, using her face, the way you might smell something in a kitchen to determine whether it's still safe to eat. 12-hour cure time on this compound, she said. We came through around 0200. This was applied, she scraped another edge, tilted her head, closer to 0400. They weren't watching. They came back and found the seal broken and repaired it before either of us woke up. That means they have sleep rotations, I said. She looked at me. That means they have a team. A team that works in shifts. If there had been continuous surveillance, they would have sealed this while we were in the conduit. I was aware, even as I said it, that this was either very good or very bad reasoning, and I was not certain which. A continuous watch would not have waited. Ferreira pointed at me without breaking eye contact. Just pointed, the way you might acknowledge a correct answer. 3-person minimum for shift rotation in a compromised environment, she said. Probably 4. We encountered 4 last night, which means they may be running at minimum capacity. They didn't seal the conduit with anyone posted at our end. She stood. They don't think we're a threat. Osek's membranes went flat. We are not a threat. We are a recovery team. We are an assessment team, not combat rated. With one sidearm between us, you have a sidearm, Ferreira said. I have a salvage kit and 60 meters of tether line. She looked around the maintenance bay. And a better understanding of the structural layout of this class of station than they probably expect. She paused. What I need is a radio. Our communications were cut when the station's relay went down. Not cut. Routed. They're running the station's comm system through their relay to manage outgoing transmissions. She looked at a ceiling panel above the secondary power conduit. Which means the internal infrastructure is still intact. It's just pointed the wrong direction. I looked at the ceiling panel. Then, at Ferreira. You want to reroute the communications array. I want to talk to someone outside the station. She pulled a chair over and stepped onto it, and pressed both hands flat on the panel with that reading by touch quality I had started to recognize as characteristic. I need 40 minutes and something I can use as an induction coupling. Did anyone keep any of the debris from the control room? Verrath reached into his carry bag, the one he'd had pressed against his side since we left the control room, I realized, as if he hadn't been able to put it down, and produced a tangle of stripped wire and 2 small capacitor housings. Ferreira looked at these items for maybe 3 seconds. Picked up the capacitor housings. Set one down. This one, she said. I was going to throw those away, Verrath said. Yeah. She climbed the chair, pressed the panel, and the ceiling access opened. Give me 40 minutes. She was done in 28. I logged each one. Not because the passage of time was particularly interesting, but because my secondary nervous system was reading the structural vibration of the station, and the frequency had changed again, and I needed something to do with my hands while I tried to determine whether the change was better or worse. The new frequency had a periodicity to it, a pulse, almost, but irregular, like a second heartbeat that had a slightly different idea about rhythm. I mentioned this to Osek at the 12-minute mark. He looked at me, then at the ceiling where Ferreira was working, then at the maintenance bay walls. The station's secondary cooling system, he said. If the main power is rerouted through bypass channels, the thermal regulation would be compensating. Inconsistently. Yes. He paused. How long until the overload becomes structural? I ran the numbers. I did not share the result. But I logged it. Ferreira came down from the ceiling at the 28-minute mark holding a small device made of components I could identify individually but would not have thought to combine in that configuration. She looked at it once, made one adjustment with her thumbnail that I could not follow, and put it to her ear. Silence. Then, hey. Silence. Then, apparently from the other end of a connection I couldn't hear, something. Yeah, it's me. She turned away slightly, which is a human privacy gesture that I respected in theory and could not benefit from in practice because the maintenance bay was acoustically unforgiving. I'm inside Kethavari. I've got a Corridor Authority Team 3, all intact, and I've recovered the data cores. We're contained in the outer ring. She listened. No. I need lateral confirmation on the operator contract. The one that changed hands 6 months ago, I need the secondary party filing. She listened. I know it's a protected registration. I know. She was quiet for a moment, and then, because if I'm right about who this is, and I'm about 9/10 sure I'm right, then you need the authority to know before we do anything that makes noise. She listened. 40 hours. Maybe 50. We're fine for now. She said the last word in a tone that made the air feel slightly different, the way a flat ceiling makes a room feel slightly lower than it is. I'll check back in 6. She disconnected the improvised device. Turned back to us. 40 hours, Osek repeated. Corridor Authority is going to send a verification team, she said. If the operator contract traces back to who I think it does, they'll send an enforcement response and we stay quiet until then, but. She sat on the floor, back against the wall, which is a human resting posture that looks, to Sethri visual processing, like a controlled collapse. If it doesn't trace back, then, we get to have a longer conversation about what we're doing here. Who do you think it is? Varath asked. She looked at the far wall. The maintenance bay had a small viewport 2 handspans across, scratched, filtering the ambient starfield outside into something pale and fractured, and Ferreira was looking at it in the way that meant she was not really looking at the viewport. There are 8 licensed logistics operators in the corridor, she said. 7 of them have standard profit structures. One of them is a data brokerage running recovery ops under a transport cover, and 2 years ago they extracted proprietary navigational data from a decommissioned Vreth-class waystation that killed 11 people when it was used to redirect their ship. She paused. The authority never formally connected it. I have spent my professional career going through decommissioned stations and I know what extraction looks like. She looked at her hands. This looks like extraction. The maintenance bay was quiet. The structural vibration ran its irregular pulse against my secondary nervous system. The stars through the small viewport didn't move. You've known this since before we boarded, I said. She didn't confirm or deny this. I logged, Ferreira came onto this station knowing what had happened here and, approximately who was responsible. She is a salvage operative. This is not within her operational mandate. She had a personal radio contact who could access protected contract registrations, which is also not within standard salvage operative parameters. A pause in my own thoughts. I am beginning to understand that Ferreira's operational parameters are significantly wider than her job title implies. I am choosing not to investigate this observation further at this time because we are sealed in a maintenance bay and I need her functional. I put the log recorder down. For the first time in, I believe, my entire professional career, I stopped logging and just sat with someone in the quiet. The nutritional bar smell was still faint in the recycled air. Day 3 was the day with the radio. Not the improvised radio Ferreira had built, the device she checked in on twice and stored in her suit pocket like it was unremarkable, like building functional communications infrastructure from salvaged capacitor housing and stripped wire was a logistical task rather than a technical achievement. The other radio. The one we found. Varath found it, actually. He'd been working through the maintenance bay's stored equipment with the methodical desperation of someone who needed a task to keep their threat response from crystallizing into something immobilizing. He'd organized the emergency power cells by charge level. He'd cataloged the maintenance drone housings. He'd found, in a sealed case behind a secondary junction panel, a Peltani emergency broadcast unit, 40 years old, the original station equipment, still sealed in its transport housing. He brought it to Osek, who looked at it with the careful expression of someone trying not to let hope become structural. The standard authentication codes, Osek said. If the emergency unit uses the original station codes, it does, Varath said. I checked. They never updated the unit after the second electronic seal replacement. It runs on original spec. Osek looked at Ferreira. She was sitting with her back against the wall, eating the last portion of the engine coolant nutrition bar, watching them with the expression I had started to catalog as she already knows the problem with this. The emergency broadcast would be detectable, she said. On this station's internal grid, they'll have a sensor sweep running. The moment you activate that unit, they'll know exactly which maintenance bay we're in. We're in the outer ring, Osek said. They know the outer ring. They sealed our conduit. They already know approximately. Knowing the ring and knowing the bay are different. Right now we have one tactical advantage. She looked at the broadcast unit. We give that up the moment we turn that on. 40 hours, Osek said, is a long time. She was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that my species does poorly. We go quiet in straight lines, one thing stopping and nothing yet starting, which registers as absence. Ferreira's quiet was different. It was occupant. It had texture. Something was happening in it that was not visible from the outside. Yes, she said. It is. She stood, crossed to the broadcast unit, and looked at it without touching it. Then, she looked at the maintenance bay's secondary junction panel, the one Verath had found it behind. Then, at the viewport. Then, briefly, at the ceiling. Okay, she said. Different approach. What if the signal doesn't come from here? Osek's membranes shifted. Explain. This station class has maintenance drone infrastructure throughout the ring levels. The drones run on independent power cells. She tapped the housing of one of the dormant drones Verath had catalogued. If I can get a drone running a standard patrol path and attach the broadcast unit to it, the signal traces to the drone's position, not ours. We get our transmission out, they chase a machine around the outer ring levels while we stay here. Verath looked at the drone. Then, at the broadcast unit. Then, at Ferreira with an expression I logged as I would never have thought of that, and I am uncertain whether I am impressed or whether this is making me more afraid. Can you interface the broadcast unit with a drone that old? I asked. No, she said. But, I can interface the drone with the broadcast unit in a way that the drone thinks it's receiving a repair instruction from Maintenance Central. The drone will follow the maintenance path. Not the broadcast path. The drone will follow the maintenance path while broadcasting, yes. She picked up the drone housing and turned it over. They'll track the signal to the drone. They'll catch the drone eventually. By then, the authority relay team should be close enough to pick up the transmission. She set the drone down. It's a delay tactic, not a solution. But, we have 40 hours to fill. I logged, Ferreira has proposed a solution that uses the station's own infrastructure against the people controlling the station, with zero additional resources, in approximately 4 minutes of looking at available materials. I am going to start a separate sublog for things Ferreira has done that I do not have a category for. This is item 1. She spent 6 hours on the drone. I watched most of it. Not because I could assist, I have maintenance-adjacent technical training, not actual maintenance skill, and Ferreira's work was somewhere past actual maintenance skill and into a territory I lack the vocabulary for, but because watching her was the most consistently informative thing available to me in the maintenance bay, and I log things. She worked with the kind of focused economy of motion that my species associates with formal expertise, except that formal expertise in Sethfree culture requires credentialing and documentation and peer verification, and Ferreira had none of those things and clearly didn't need them. She talked while she worked. Not to us, not to herself, or not obviously to herself, but in a low, steady murmur that I eventually identified as something between commentary and thought process made audible. Okay, so the original spec on this drive coupling is different from the standard because this model predates the corridor standardization push, which means the interface protocol is going to this wire has been repaired before. Someone did this with heat sealant, which is wrong but also worked. So it held 40 years, which says something about stubbornness. The broadcast unit's authentication handshake is going to take the drone 8 seconds to process, but if I set the drone's patrol trigger to manual release, I can time the delay to. At one point she stopped completely, sat back on her heels, and stared at the open drone housing for a full minute. No movement. No talking. The station's structural vibration continued its irregular pulse around us. Then, she said, to no one, "Huh," and went back to work. Varath, who had been watching from across the bay, leaned toward me. "What does huh mean?" "I believe it indicates a new realization," I said. "Good or bad realization?" I watched Ferreira pick up a wire she had previously set aside and begin integrating it into the junction she was working on, with the confidence of someone who has confirmed a suspicion. "Good, I think." He looked at her. Then, at me. "She does that a lot." "Yes." "Does it stop being unsettling?" I considered this honestly. "I'll let you know." The drone was ready 4 hours later. Ferreira ran 2 diagnostic checks I couldn't follow, made one final adjustment that took 30 seconds and appeared to involve gently hitting the housing with the heel of her hand, a calibration method I have nowhere in my technical manual but, which, apparently, worked, and sat back. "Okay," she said. "When I release this, we have maybe 3 hours before they figure out the broadcast is running from a mobile source." After that, she looked at Asek. How far out would the authority team be at this point? He did the calculation. His membranes held very still. If they dispatched within 6 hours of your contact, they would be within microburst relay range in approximately 30 hours from now. So we need the drone to buy 30 hours. I said 3 hours before they locate it, yes. But, after that, she looked at the drone. Can 4 people in a maintenance bay maintain enough acoustic uncertainty to suggest the drone is not the only thing broadcasting? She looked at us. I need them unsure. I don't need them fooled. Asek looked at me. I looked at Varath. Varath looked at the floor. "You want us to move around," I said. "I want you to be unpredictable," she said. "Which I suspect comes naturally." I logged. Ferreira has now assigned me a tactical role that consists of existing inconsistently. In 23 years of service to the SciFi Observational Corps, no one has found this use for me. I am unclear whether to be insulted or recognized. The drone went out through a ceiling access at 0340 station time. For 31 hours, we listened to it move through the outer ring maintenance infrastructure on its broadcast patrol, its signal running clean through 40 years of dormant corridor architecture, carrying Asek's official authority request to anyone within relay range. For 22 of those hours, nothing happened. For the next 6, we moved. Not significantly. Ferreira's instructions were specific and counterintuitive. We moved through the maintenance bay in irregular intervals, 3 paces here and, for there, resting in asymmetric positions, occasionally activating and deactivating the small power cell charge indicators on the emergency equipment. Nothing that constituted a transmission. Nothing that would be unambiguously identified as multiple people moving. Just enough inconsistency in the base thermal signature and electromagnetic profile to suggest that the drone was not the whole story. This is, I later read, a technique used by a specific subset of human military operators when conducting evasion in sensor-monitored environments. It is called pattern noise generation, and it requires a working understanding of the monitoring system you're trying to confuse. Ferreira had assessed the station's internal sensor grid on day 1 without appearing to do so, and had been carrying that assessment in her head for 3 days. I logged this at hour 27. She assessed their surveillance when she walked the corridor on day 1. She was not just reading the station. She was reading the monitoring infrastructure. Every time she looked at a junction panel or a ceiling fixture or checked the wall routing, she was cataloging sensor positions. A pause. She walked in the center of the corridor because walls have sensors. Not because she wanted sightlines. Because she wanted to model what they could see. A longer pause. I am revising my assessment again. I think I need more assessment categories. Hour 31 was when the Authority Response Team's lead vessel entered microburst relay range. We heard it, or rather, Ferreira heard it, through the improvised radio she'd built 3 days ago, and told us. Then, she told us something else. The contract traces back to a Vreth-class data extraction operation running under a corridor logistics license, she said. The Authority is treating this as an enforcement action, not a recovery. She looked at Asek. They want the people here alive. For testimony. OSEX membranes moved. That complicates extraction. It also means they're not sending a demolition response. She was quiet. That's good. Varath said, very carefully, how does it affect us? Ferreira was quiet for a moment. Through the small viewport, the stars were the same pale fractured light they'd been for 3 days. The structural vibration had not changed. The maintenance bay smelled of recycled air and something faintly chemical and the ghost of a nutrition bar that was 4 days gone. The enforcement team comes in from the docking approach, the secondary sleeve, because the primary is still sheared. She was talking through the scenario like she was checking her own work. That pushes the operator team toward the inner levels, away from the approach. Inner levels have limited egress. They're going to know the authority is here and they're going to need to decide, she paused, whether to hold the data cores as leverage, or run with them, or destroy them. We have the data cores, I said. Yes. We took them from the control room on day 1. Yes. They don't know that. She looked at me. I logged, Ferreira is looking at me the way my assessment officer looked at me when I filed a particularly complete incident report. It is an expression that I will describe as the person who already knew the answer confirming that someone else has arrived at it. They're going to hold a position they think has leverage, she said. And it doesn't. Which means when the enforcement team closes in, they're going to have a very brief negotiating window before they realize they've been operating on a false premise for 9 days. She picked up the carry bag with the data cores in it. I'd like to be the person who tells them. OSEX membranes held perfectly still. You want to approach an armed data extraction team to inform them that the material they've been protecting is already gone. I want to give them the option of a peaceful extraction before the authority enforcement team makes that choice for them. She looked at him. 11 people died on the Vreth incident because the extraction team panicked at the enforcement response. The maintenance bay was very quiet. She wants to negotiate, Varath said, to no one in particular. I want to prevent something preventable, Ferreira said. It's not the same thing. I looked at the data cores in her bag. I looked at the small viewport and the fractured stars. I looked at Ferreira, who was standing in the low amber emergency light with a bag of stolen data cores and an improvised radio and 31 hours of methodical patience and the absolutely calm expression of someone who has decided. There is a Seferi word, Velmeric, which translates, poorly, as the willingness to walk toward the thing that is most likely to hurt you, because the alternative is that someone else gets hurt instead. It is an old word. We have not used it in common speech for several hundred years because it describes a behavior that we, as a species, evolved away from, the individual sacrifice for the collective, the unnecessary risk for the stranger. We consider it, in modern Seferi culture, to be a behavioral artifact of pre-rational species development. We do not do this anymore because it is not efficient. I logged, Ferreira is doing Velmeric. She is doing it because 11 people died and she does not want 11 more to die, and she has calculated, in the way she calculates things, which is not like any calculation I have been taught, that she can prevent it. She is not asking us to come. She is not explaining why it matters. She picked up the bag and she has Velmeric in her face, and I do not have a more current word for it in my language because we stopped needing one. I'm coming with you, I said. She looked at me. Not the assessment confirmation look. Something else, something that I filed under a new category I created on the spot, which I labeled unexpected and not unwelcome. You don't have to, she said. I log things, I said. This is going to be worth logging. She held my gaze for a moment that lasted precisely as long as it needed to. Okay, she said. We went. There is a section of my incident report for the Kethavari incident, the official version, the one that goes to the Strategic Memory Division with the classification header, where I describe the final engagement with the operator team as Contractor Ferreira, Human, Salvage Operations, Grade 3 Certification, conducted a voluntary negotiation approach toward the contained extraction personnel, resulting in non-violent resolution and full compliance pending authority enforcement team arrival. This is accurate. It is also, in the way that accurate summaries are always incomplete, entirely inadequate. What happened was this. We left the maintenance bay through the ceiling access, which Ferreira navigated with the fluency of someone for whom ceilings are simply floors that happen to be overhead, and I navigated by compressing 4 secondary joints simultaneously and moving in a way that I hope no one with a functioning visual system will ever witness again. The inner ring maintenance infrastructure was tighter than the outer service corridors built for drone access and single technician maintenance, lit in the station's cool emergency amber, running with the constant background vibration that my secondary nervous system had now been reading for 9 days and had stopped trying to classify. Ferreira moved through it without a lamp. I noticed this on the 3rd junction. She was making turns without checking, not confident turns, not the turns of someone who has memorized a layout, but the turns of someone reading something in real time. I watched her slow at a junction, turn her head, and take the left branch with the same certainty she'd had when she'd said 12 days in the first corridor. "How are you navigating?" I asked. "Floor's colder on the right," she said. "Coolant lines run under the left passage. Warmer deck means closer to a power node, and the control suite is on a power node." She glanced back at me. "You can feel it?" I read structural vibration. "Not thermal gradient." "Close enough." She turned right at the next junction, which contradicted what she'd just said, but I had learned enough in 9 days to know that contradiction in Ferreira's navigation usually meant she was responding to something new. "There's a door ahead. Secondary seal. Same model as the control room one. Do we remove the hinges again?" "No. It's open." I could not see that it was open. She was reading it from something I didn't have access to. The door, when we reached it, was indeed opened, not propped, but ajar, the seal disengaged and the door resting in the frame by about 4 centimeters, emitting a thin line of light from beyond. Voices. 2, maybe 3. Pelthani speech. I cannot hear the content at that distance, but Pelthani vocal patterning is distinctive, and something else underneath it, the kind of underneath that tells you even without knowing the words that the conversation is not going well. Ferreira stopped. She put her back against the corridor wall, not the center now, the wall, and held up one hand. She was listening. For approximately 40 seconds she listened to a conversation she had no translation device for, and her face did the thing I now associated with processing. "Please wait," the specific absence of expression that preceded the presence of a decision. "Then," she said, very quietly, to me, "they're arguing about whether to abort." "You understand Pelthani?" "I understand the rhythm of an argument about whether to cut losses." She looked at the door. "One of them wants to run. One of them doesn't. The third isn't saying much." She paused. "That's the one I'm worried about. The one who isn't saying much. The one who's already decided." She looked at me. "When someone stops arguing, it's because the argument is over for them. They've made their choice internally and they're waiting for an opportunity." I logged. In real time, Ferreira is reading the emotional state of a room through a partially open door, in a language she does not speak, using vocal rhythm alone. I am standing here with 4 eyes and 7 auditory membranes, and I was tracking the ventilation hum. Updating assessment. Updating entire category. "What do we do?" I asked. "We knock," she said. I processed this. We knock. We announce ourselves as non-threats before we're visible. Give them time to react before we're in the room." She looked at the door. "The one who's decided, I want them to have a second to reconsider before they're looking at us. If they have weapons, they probably do. That's why we're announcing." She adjusted the bag strap on her shoulder. "Also, I'm going to make a sound before I knock. You're going to hear it and it's going to sound wrong. Don't react." "What sound?" She told me. I logged. She told me to make a sound again. "It is a different sound from the last time." I have more questions than I had before she explained. She knocked. 3 knocks. Evenly spaced. Not urgent, deliberate, the way you knock on a door when you'd like it to be opened in a reasonable time frame, not the way you knock when the building is collapsing. Then, she made the sound. It was, "I am going to struggle with this, and I want to note in my log that I am aware the description is going to sound wrong." It was a greeting. A specific greeting. Peltani greeting protocol uses a 3-beat knock followed by a vocalic identification marker that indicates the knocker's broad social category. The specific marker Ferreira used indicates non-military civilian with no ownership claim on the space being entered. I know this because I looked it up afterward. She knew it without looking it up. The arguing stopped. A pause. A much longer pause than I was comfortable with, standing in a corridor with my secondary nervous system reading structural vibration and my professional dignity at an all-time low. The door opened. The Peltani who opened it was shorter than Asek, with membranes that were not flat or rigid but doing something complicated and dynamic that I parsed, after a moment, as interrupted mid-argument, threat assessment running, hasn't decided yet. He was holding a data extraction tool in one hand, which was not a weapon but was thick enough and heavy enough to function as one. Behind him, I could see two more, one near the far wall with membranes pulled to the maximum fear threat configuration I had seen in 9 days, and one sitting at a makeshift console with their back to the door. The sitting one did not turn around. That one had decided. Ferreira said, in standard, "My name is Ferreira. I've been in your outer ring maintenance bay for 9 days. I have your data cores." She held up the bag. "I'd like to give them back." The standing Peltani stared at her. His membranes moved through 4 distinct states in approximately 2 seconds, which in Peltani is the physical equivalent of several complex and contradictory thoughts arriving simultaneously. He started. "I'm not going to pretend I'm not a problem for you," Ferreira said. "I am. I'm a problem who's been in your station for 9 days, and I've got your material, and there's an authority enforcement response incoming." She did not lower the bag. She did not raise her voice. "I'm also the only person between you and whatever the authority does when they arrive, and you're still holding the extraction equipment." The one at the console turned around. She was older than the other two. Female, I thought, though Peltani gender presentation is subtle to non-Peltani observers. Her membranes were not in a fear configuration. They were not in any configuration I had a name for, pulled partially back, slightly elevated, with an asymmetric spread that in the texts I later read is associated with Peltani deep assessment. She was measuring Ferreira the way Ferreira measured things. "You have had the cores for 9 days, she said. Her standard was precise, academic. "You did not destroy them." "No. You did not transmit their contents." "I transmitted the serial numbers. For a manifest." Ferreira's voice was level. "I didn't read them. I don't have the capability to read them in the field, and even if I did," she set the bag down on the floor between herself and the door, "that's not why I'm here." "Why are you here?" "Because 11 people died at Vreth." She said it simply. No accusation in it. No performance. "I've been on the after report for every decommissioned station in this corridor for 2 years. I've read the Vreth documentation. I know what happened when the enforcement response came in hard." She looked at the older Peltani. "I'm not saying what happened there was your fault. I'm saying I don't want to see it again." The maintenance bay was very quiet. The structural vibration continued. The station's second pulse rhythm, the one I had been tracking for 9 days, ran underneath everything. "You walked toward us," the older Peltani said, "to prevent our people from being harmed." Ferreira didn't answer that directly. She looked at the bag on the floor. "The authority team is going to want a clean resolution. A clean resolution requires you to cooperate. I have 9 days of documentation logs, technical recordings, personnel witness accounts that gives you a cooperation credit before the first conversation." She paused. "I was going to file it regardless. I'm telling you it exists so you know what's in it." "Why tell us?" Ferreira looked at her. "Because you should know." I was standing against the corridor wall, which is where Ferreira had positioned me, out of the sightline of the sitting one who had decided, who was now standing and staring at Ferreira with membranes in the maximum assessment configuration, and I was recording. I was also, and I want to be precise about this, experiencing something I did not have a category for. It was not fear. I had catalogued fear quite thoroughly over the preceding 9 days, and this was not that. It was not awe, which is what I had been told to expect when working alongside humans in crisis situations, the standard briefing summary being you may find human performance during extreme events to produce a species reflexive awe response, which should be noted but not acted upon in a professional context. It was not awe. It was something that felt, in my secondary nervous system, the way the structural vibration felt when two frequencies arrived at the station simultaneously and, briefly, for exactly 1 second, aligned a resonance, a moment where two different patterns found the same note. Ferreira was standing in a room with 3 people who had done a terrible thing and were probably going to face serious consequences for it, holding a bag full of the evidence that would ensure those consequences, and she was telling them what she had and what it could do for them. Not because she had to. Not because it served her position. Because they didn't know. And she thought they should. There is no word in my language for this. I checked. I have a very extensive internal vocabulary and I checked all of it, standing in that corridor, recording. There is a word for strategic information sharing. There is a word for mercy. There is a word for the tactical advantage of demonstrating non-aggression. None of these are what she was doing, and I could not file it correctly, and I have been trying to file it correctly for every cycle since. The older Peltani said, "Set down the data collection equipment." The standing Peltani looked at her. "Set it down," she said. He set it down. The sitting one, the one who had decided, the one I had been watching, stood for a long moment. Ferreira did not look at her. She was still looking at the older Peltani, and her expression was the one I had catalogued as patient, which is different from waiting, which is different from expecting. Patient is what you are when you have done what you can and you are giving the outcome room to arrive on its own. The sitting one sat back down. Not in defiance. Not in surrender. In the posture of someone who has recalculated and found a different answer. "We have 20 minutes before the authority team docks," Ferreira said. "I would like to use them to make sure everyone here is in a position to cooperate fully." She looked at the older Peltani. "If you're willing." "You said you have documentation," the older Peltani said. "Logs. 63 hours of personal recording. Plus a technical record of all modifications made to station infrastructure during our time here, and a drone broadcast log that will document the timeline of the enforcement response." She paused. "None of it characterizes you in terms I chose. It characterizes the situation in terms I observed. You are a salvage operative. Yes. This is not your function." Ferreira was quiet for a moment. "I've been going through decommissioned stations for 6 years. They're full of things people left behind." She looked at the data cores on the floor. "Some of those things are important. I logged, because I log everything, and because I have been logging this story for 2 years and I still believe every entry in it is worth logging." Ferreira. 0840, Day 9, Kethavari Station Outer Ring. 3 armed personnel. 0 injuries. 0 shots fired. She set the bag down on the floor and she told them what she had and she gave them 20 minutes. "I have filed this incident report 11 times in 11 different formats. I have revised the threat assessment 4 times. I have updated my personnel categorization for Ferreira once, and then, again, and then, a 3rd time, and then, I created a new category and put only her name in it. The category is labeled Velmeric in Practice. Irrational willingness to walk toward harm for the sake of strangers. I noted this as a behavioral artifact of pre-rational species development when I was first briefed on human psychology. I have been wrong about the pre-rational part for 9 days and I am formally retracting it." The authority enforcement team docked 22 minutes later. The resolution was, by official record, clean, full cooperation, complete documentation, 0 injuries to any party. The operator team was remanded to authority custody. The data cores were logged and transferred. The incident file was closed. I filed my documentation 3 days after returning to Vethera Corridor Station. I filed it completely, as I file everything. I included 63 hours of personal log recordings. I included the technical record. I included a personnel assessment for contractor Ferreira, grade 3 salvage operations, which ran to 11 pages, which my commanding officer read twice, and which is now in the Strategic Memory Division under the header Behavioral Anomaly, unresolved. I have spoken to Ferreira twice since then. Once to confirm documentation for the official file. Once, 3 months later, when she sent a message that said, "Hey, how's the logging?" I sent back, "Complete." She sent back, "Fine." Ate the last bar. Terrible. I logged this exchange. I do not know why. It seemed important. I have returned to Kethavari Station once, on a standard observational pass as part of a corridor integrity audit. The station has been decommissioned. The secondary docking sleeve is repaired. The conduit we crawl through is sealed, properly this time, with the correct compound applied at the correct stage. The maintenance bay we lived in for 9 days is empty. Someone left a carry bag in the corner. Old, strap repaired with a different color cord than the original, contents empty. I do not know if it was hers. I logged it. Object found in Outer Ring Maintenance Bay, Kethavari Station, decommissioned. Carry bag, salvage grade, repaired strap. Unknown provenance. Condition, functional. I stood in that empty bay for approximately 12 minutes. The structural vibration was gone. The station was quiet, the correct quiet, the nothing happening quiet, the quiet of a building that has done its job and been set down. Outside the small viewport, the stars were the same fractured pale light they'd been for 9 days, the light that doesn't move. I am Savithor and Kale, and I log everything. I have 11 incident reports in my career. 5 of them are about Ferreira. Those 5 are the ones the division flagged, forwarded, reviewed, and filed under unresolved, not because they were incomplete, but because the behavior they document does not resolve into any existing category in the Sethri behavioral taxonomy. The division is, as I understand it, still working on this. I am not. I have my own category now. One name in it. And a word I pulled out of archival Sethri to put at the top of the category header, a word my own civilization decided we didn't need anymore, a word we let go because it described something irrational and costly and not at all efficient. But she did it in front of me. She did it in a maintenance bay and a conduit and a dark corridor and a room with 3 people who had every reason to harm her, and she set the bag down on the floor and she said, "Because you should know." And the word is not unresolved. The word is Velmaric. And the next time my commanding officer asks me to brief a new crew on human behavioral profiles, which she does every time a human contractor joins a corridor operation, because apparently 5 incident reports makes you the station expert, I am going to lead with that word. And I am going to tell them exactly what it means. And I am going to watch their faces when they understand.